Hi, friends. I'm Colleen Dieter, landscape consultant, certified arborist, and founder of atxgardens.com. Welcome to the ATX Gardens podcast, where every other week I share simple, timely tips to help your garden thrive. Whether you're a seasoned green thumb or just getting started, you'll learn exactly what to do in your Central Texas garden right now. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe and find even more gardening resources at atxgardens.com. Hey there, gardening friends. Thanks for joining me today for episode 6 of the ATX Gardens podcast, which will air on November 27th, 2025. I'm Colleen Dieter, a landscape consultant at atxgardens.com. Today's episode is all about what to do in the first half of December. But before we get to our gardening to-do list, this episode is sponsored by my landscape consulting business, atxgardens.com. I help my customers by alleviating their anxieties about their yards. This week, I met with Annika in Crestview. She wants to turn her suburban lawn into a pollinator garden full of plants that will attract butterflies and bees. I gave her advice about how to get started by killing her lawn using the sheet mulching method. That's layering cardboard, compost, and mulch to create a clear planting space before planting. We also discussed which plants would work in her yard, like mist flowers and desert willow, and I explained how tree planting will help tie the whole landscape together. So if you have questions about your yard, make an appointment today at atxgardens.com. All right, let's get to the show. In the first half of December, watch out for freezing weather. Learn more by listening to my last episode where I go in depth about how to prepare citrus, tropicals, vegetables, and other sensitive plants for cold weather. Remember that most native plants in the landscape do not need any special care during freezing weather. It's just the tropicals and sensitive plants that aren't native to areas with freezing weather. With the rains we had at the beginning of November, I'm noticing my first crop of winter weeds are starting to sprout now. And the key to success with winter weeds is identifying the seedlings and learning what they look like when they're small. So the number one mistake that people make is removing wildflower seedlings. Okay, so if you planted wildflowers or you're in a new house and you're not sure what all is coming up, try to identify the seedlings. Native American Seed Company, there'll be a link in the show notes to their website. On their website and in their catalog, they have photos of what the seedlings look like when they're first coming up. Some winter weeds can be considered wildflowers, and it's up to you to decide which plants you want to keep in your yard and which ones you want to remove based on your personal gardening philosophy. For example, there's a common winter weed called henbit that comes up in my yard every winter. The botanical name is Lamium amplexicauliole. I love henbit, and I choose to keep most of it in my yard because it's edible and it benefits bees. I also keep dandelions. The botanical name for dandelions is Pterocaxum officinale for all the same reasons. They're edible and they're really good for bees. There's just not enough hours in the day to pull every weed that comes up in my yard, so I decide to purposely keep some of them. There are native plant enthusiasts who would not keep henbit and dandelions in their yards because they're not native plants and they do not benefit native animals as much as native plants would. On the other hand, there's a winter weed called hedge parsley, and the botanical name for that one is Torillus arvensis, and it's also known as the sock destroyer. And this plant starts out as a seedling looking like a little tiny carrot seedling, and then it grows throughout the winter, and in the early spring it will bloom with really beautiful white flowers. But then the white flowers turn into burrs where the seeds are, and they get stuck in your clothes and in your hair. And if you have pets, they get stuck in pet hair, and they're a real nuisance. And they are also not a native plant to this area. So I have not yet found a compelling reason to keep that plant. So in December, I'll grab a hoe and I'll start cutting them down when they're tiny. So I'll have fewer big plants to pull as they keep growing. December is really the best time for getting after all those little seedlings when they're small. I like to use a Dutch push hoe for mulched areas, and I'll use a stirrup hoe in gravel or loose soil. A flame weeder is excellent for weeds growing in cracks. Just be sure not to use it on windy days or if there's a burn ban. And of course, see my show notes for links to those tools on Amazon. I'm an Amazon affiliate, so I do get commissions for sales of those tools. There are some native plants in our gardens that can get out of hand. They're very prolific. They put out a lot of seeds, and winter is a really good time to remove them. So that's things like hackberry saplings and little baby trumpet vines. Removing them in the winter is more satisfying because they're dormant. And if you don't get all the roots out, it takes them months and months before they'll grow back. Speaking of little trees, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our woody plants in the winter. So now that the weather is cooling off-ish and the trees have lost their leaves, it's okay to start pruning them. So make sure you don't prune any trees that haven't lost all of their leaves yet. Most of the shade trees and understory trees will likely be losing their leaves now. Most of the shade and understory trees do not need pruning. Make sure you know why you are pruning a tree before you do it. The compelling reasons for pruning a tree include clearing walkways, clearing driveways and the street, clearing your roof, and removing branches that are rubbing on each other. So whenever you have branches that keep getting injured over and over again because they're getting hit by vehicles or they're rubbing on the roof, that creates an open wound on the tree that can't seal. And diseases and bugs can get into the tree that way through those wounds. So if you're pruning, make sure you're pruning just to remove branches that are getting injured over and over and over again. That's the best reason to prune a tree. Otherwise, most trees don't need to be pruned. I'm teaching a tree pruning class at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center in January, and there'll be more on that later in the episode. So now what's going on with fruit trees in our landscapes in the first week of December? Now is a great time for planting containerized palm and stone fruits. Palm fruits are the ones that have cores, like apples and pears, And the stone fruits are the ones that have pits, like peaches and nectarines. It's also a good time for planting containerized grapes and persimmons. When I say containerized, I mean trees that come in pots from the nursery. But for better selection, like more variety and healthier trees, you may want to wait until mid to late December and into January to visit the Natural Gardener and other local nurseries to get bare root fruit trees instead. And I'll talk more about this in future episodes, but there's a traditional way of growing and transporting both fruit trees and nut trees where they're grown as little seedlings or saplings at the nursery, and then they're removed from whatever media they were being grown in, removed from soil or sand at the nursery, and just shipped, packed with like paper or sawdust in a plastic bag. And that's called bare root because there's no soil around the roots. They're bare. Bare root fruit trees tend to be healthier and have better results than container trees. And they're shipped long distances and they're easier to ship than other plants because they're lighter weight. So the nurseries tend to have more varieties of bare root fruit trees to choose from than container trees. And they also tend to be a better value too. So we'll talk more about bare root fruit trees coming up when they start arriving at the nurseries in a couple of weeks. So you may want to make room for some bare root fruit trees in your landscape or hold out for bare root fruit trees instead of containers. Protect your citrus trees from freezing temperatures whenever we get a freeze at night. Listen to the last podcast for more tips on protecting citrus. For palm fruits and stone fruits, when they drop most of their leaves, spray them with a copper fungicide to control bacterial, canker, and fungal diseases. Bordeaux mix is also a classic organic choice for spraying dormant trees to prevent fungal and bacterial diseases. Also consider spraying with a probiotic like Compost Tea or Serenade, and we'll have links to those products in the show notes. And now we're ready for our middle of the show sponsor break. Hey y'all, this is Colleen Dieter with atxgardens.com. You know I give plenty of gardening advice on my podcast, but there's nothing like meeting in person to get the best information for your plants and landscape. And that's what I can do for you. Visit atxgardens.com. As a certified arborist and professional gardener, I've been giving advice to do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. I help my customers by alleviating their anxieties about their yards. Visit atxgardens.com to book a consultation with me. During the consultation, we'll walk through your yard together and answer all of your questions. Also at atxgardens.com, you can shop Colleen's favorite things. That's gardening apparel, tools, and books that I often mention during the podcast. From trees to vegetables to wildflowers, I'm here to help. Make an appointment at atxgardens.com. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about perennials and bulbs. And there's really not much to do right now with perennials and bulbs. It's really not time for planting, dividing, or transplanting any warm season perennials. Wait until early spring for that. The cool season perennials like yarrow, columbines, and spiderworts could all be planted now. So get to that because they are not sensitive to freezing weather. You may have some perennials in your yard that look kind of shabby now, where they might have powdery mildew disease, or they're just really the hot season perennials that are really winding down and they're done making seeds and everything. They may start looking really shabby. For example, I have 4 o'clocks in my yard and they're just looking really, really pitiful. I went ahead and cut them down. I have a customer who has some tall rubelia, also known as Mexican petunias. They were getting powdery mildew, so we went ahead and cut those down. But if they all still look okay, leave them as long as you possibly can. Leave the perennials alone right now as much as you can. And we'll be talking more about how to trim them and when to trim them in future episodes. Okay, now moving on to the vegetable garden. And I'm going to also lump together the herbs here. So, herbs and vegetables into this part of the podcast. Again, watch out for freezing temperatures. Make sure that you're keeping the garden moist all the time, especially before freezes. Listen to the last episode for more tips about how to protect your garden from freezing temperatures. So, planting vegetables and herbs at this time of year is a little bit controversial depending on who you ask. Some sources say planting all the cool season greens like arugula, lettuce, collards, and root vegetables like beets, turnips, carrots, radishes now is okay. Same with the cool season annual herbs like calendula, cilantro, and dill. But other folks say to wait until late January because the repeated winter freezes can damage tiny seedlings. It depends on your risk tolerance. Planting from seeds on a warm day is pretty easy, and you can get free seeds at the local seed libraries or at seed swaps, or maybe you have extra leftover commercial seeds anyway. So you can always replant seeds if the first batch doesn't work out because of bad weather. So you can decide, whether or not you want to take that risk. Now, if you're buying transplants for other plants that can't be planted from seed, like cabbages and broccoli and cauliflower, that's a different story because that's going to be more expensive and a little bit more risky. So it's up to you to decide whether or not you feel comfortable planting vegetables and herbs right now. I think planting from seed is no big deal, and I'm going to keep planting from seed all winter, but I'm a little bit reluctant to plant transplants that could be damaged by cold. Perennial herbs like oregano, thyme, rosemary, those I think you should wait until spring to plant those because they are very cold sensitive for the most part and they may not get established enough before a hard freeze and that can kill them. For certain crops, it's best to start them indoors as seeds because their life cycle is very long. So by the time they start to sprout and grow, our weather changes so fast here in Austin that they don't have time to actually produce food before the weather changes and kills them. An example of that are tomatoes and peppers. So a lot of gardeners choose to start their own tomatoes and peppers indoors because there's some advantages. When you start your own seeds indoors, you get more plants for less money And you can grow certain special varieties that you can't buy as transplants from the nursery. So there may be a particular kind of hot pepper that you really like that you might not be able to find at the nursery. Those plants, those warm season vegetables, they need to be started indoors about 8 weeks before the last freeze. And our last freeze in Austin is about March 1st. So if you go back 8 weeks, count back 8 weeks from March 1st, that puts us at about January 1st. So if you're interested in starting warm season vegetables indoors, like tomatoes and peppers, some people like to start basil this way. You'll need to start getting your setup ready now. Select an area with a south-facing window if possible. Some equipment like heating pads that go under your soil containers help make the soil warmer so that the seeds will sprout faster. Grow lights can help. You'll need trays and pots, things to start the plants in, and you'll need a propagation mix to use to start the seeds. Propagation soil mix. We'll have links to all of those items in the show notes. You'll have to think about keeping pets away from your new seedlings so that they don't lay on them, dig in them, or eat them too. So think about how you might keep pets away. So start getting all of that stuff ready now so that you're ready in January to start planting and you'll have your little transplants ready to go into your vegetable garden in early March. The seed catalogs start arriving now. So take a look and start making your selections. And don't forget about seeds that you might have saved from past years of gardening. And look for seed swap events and check out the Austin Public Library seed collections and many of the suburban and small town libraries around Central Texas also have seed libraries supported by Central Texas Seed Savers. Now, I'm going to give you some winter advice about turf grass lawns. So really any time from October to March is a good time for top dressing your turf grass with a 1/4 inch of compost. You can use any kind of compost that you like. I prefer turkey compost because it's very high nitrogen, and the turf grass typically needs quite a bit of nitrogen. Top dressing the grass is even more important than fertilizing because the compost adds beneficial microorganisms to the soil, and those friendly little critters eat the grass clippings and other debris in the soil, and they turn it into food that your grass can use. They also aerate the soil to make it fluffier, and that provides more moisture retention and air that the grass roots need. So make sure you get some top dressing done with compost this winter. Okay, in the winter, leave the grass blades tall. Do not mow the grass except to grind up tree leaves that fall on top of it and to cut down any weeds that you might need to cut down that come up in the winter, okay? Do not mow the grass low in the fall or winter. That only exposes the sensitive parts of the grass to cold weather, which stresses it, and it leaves open spaces for weeds to grow. Okay. During the winter, get your mower serviced. Make sure the gas is drained out of it. Old gas can turn into gel and will clog up your engine. It's important that your mower blade is sharp to ensure the turf is getting a clean cut on each blade instead of a jagged wound that does not heal well. December is a great time to start the design process for removing lawn and replacing it with trees, perennials, and other beneficial plants. Make an appointment with me to learn how to reduce the amount of turf grass that you have on your property at atxgardens.com. Now, what about wildflowers in the wintertime? Now, you should be seeing some of your wildflowers starting to sprout a little bit because we did get a little bit of rain in November. So you may start seeing some bluebonnets and lemon horsemint and your, the pink evening primrose coming up. And that's really exciting. And don't worry if you don't see them yet. It's still a little bit early, but start looking for the seedlings if you planted wildflowers. And you can also plant small transplants right now of wildflowers. And sometimes the nurseries will carry little bluebonnets, firewheels, and stuff like that in 6-packs or in little 4-inch pots. So it's a really good time to look for those at the nursery and add those to your wildflower display. So I have some upcoming events. You can save the date for January 17th at 9:30. I'll be teaching a tree pruning class at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. And on January 31st, also at 9:30, I'll be teaching a winter maintenance class at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. Now, these have not been posted on the Wildflower Center website yet, so they are not open for registration yet, but I will let you know when they are. And consider signing up for the Wildflower Center newsletter, and then you'll get updates about when they get posted. And of course, also you can sign up for my newsletter at atxgardens.com, and I'll let you know when those classes get posted and you can register for them. And I'll revisit that in future episodes too. That wraps up today's episode. Don't forget to check the show notes for links to the tools, plants, and events I mentioned. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please share it with a fellow gardener. It really helps more Central Texans find the show. I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the ATX Gardens podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please follow, rate, and share it with your fellow Central Texas gardeners. For show notes, tools, and to book a consultation, visit atxgardens.com. Happy gardening, and I'll see you next